Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Digital Nomad World Weekly Series. I'm Becky, and once again, I will be your host. Today, we are going to go way up in the sky and talk about skydiving with my guest, Octavian. Octavian, you apparently were inspired to become a digital nomad after you went skydiving. Is that true?
Yeah, there is truth to that for sure.
I am really excited to hear about this story. But first of all, can you tell us about your background and how you got started as a digital nomad?
Yeah, long story short, I grew up in a country in Eastern Europe called Romania. So that was my upbringing was very close to the fall of the communist regime. So there is very much limited information about the outside world. But I felt like since I was a little kid, I had this curiosity to travel and to learn new things. And I read anything I could put my hands on. And from the early ages, I remember we have some early encounters with missionaries from the local church. So we have people coming from India or from other places, someone telling us stories. And then that became to me like a trigger, like I want to do that when I grow up. I had this on my bucket list. So yeah, I kind of grew up with this drive towards traveling, and it was just a curiosity that I had inherited. Like I was born this way, and I started traveling to various places, and then I kind of fell in love with the process of being, traveling around. The interesting part is that my life was like that way before I knew that there is a label for it. That's why I said, I don't know how much skydiving influenced me to start traveling, but I learned the term digital nomad while I was skydiving. So that's the relevancy towards it. But yeah, I was traveling way before I knew that there is a label for it. And I thought for a long time that I'm the only person in the world who does that. So that was interesting.
Oh, wow. So you first heard the term digital nomad when you were skydiving, but had you encountered before people that were working on their laptops at cafes and maybe you just thought, oh, they're at a cafe, not actually working, maybe just writing their next novel.
Yeah, I didn't know that there is such thing as a lifestyle, and there are a pile of people that have it.
All right. And so when did you finally meet your first digital nomads?
I think that that happened into the drop zone in Portugal. So when I started skydiving, digital nomads and skydiving, they're pretty connected because the majority of the skydivers are digital nomads as well. And that's when I realized that there are people who do that on full time and they can do that. And it's like, oh, they're giving a lot more energy to people like, oh, I can make this my full-time life as opposed to just doing that when I can.
All right. I'm really curious, like, how did you first get interested in skydiving? And what was your initial experience like?
Okay. So mm, I had skydiving on my bucket list for a long time. And, tandem is the most approachable option. And I wanted to do it for a while, but I had a very good friend of mine who did it before me. And I felt like I couldn't just do the same thing as my friend. I have to up the game. So I did some research and I thought in my mind that this is something that might be relevant for the viewers who are not skydivers. I thought my mind that you just go to a drop zone. The drop zone is a skydiving center. You go to the drop zone and you tell people that you're more brave than the rest of the guys and they're gonna let you jump alone. But this is not how it works. So I found a group on Facebook about skydivers, and I just made a note there, and I made a post there about the fact that I want to do solo jumps, and I made it so trivially that sounded like I'm looking for a bar to have a few drinks with my friends. And somebody texted me back, it's like, dude, this is not how it works. You need commitment, you need discipline, and you need hard work to become a skydiver. And then I do realize that this is something which is difficult. This is something that you have to work for. You need to it's going to challenge you. However, I got in touch with my instructor and I had the exact same approach. Like, hey, can I do this in 3 days? And he said, well, in theory, yes, but like you might need longer. How about 4 days? And he was like, okay, maybe take 5 just in case. And one of the things is that skydiving is very much correlated and dependent on the weather. So I was living in London at the time, and knowing that jumping in London or not London is pretty difficult because you're going to have huge delays because of the weather. So it seems like Portugal might be the best option for price and weather. So I decided to go to Portugal. With my courageous and crazy mindset, I'm just going to get this done in a couple of days and then I'm going to be off to it. So my first experience as a skydiver, basically you have to do a training day on the ground, just learn the basics, and then the second day you do the jumps. And my first jump, I was in an exceptionally primal way because I never did a tandem before. I didn't know what to expect, so I just jumped. But I couldn't remember anything but the very basic stuff. So you have three maneuvers that you need to do, and you need to deploy the parachute. That's everything that you need to do in the first jump. And it was so intense to myself that I couldn't remember anything but just my maneuver. So if you would ask me something or something would happen, I didn't know how to react to it. I was just primed to the only action which I knew, and I couldn't do anything else. And then I realized that this is something really, really challenging, and you have to battle yourself, and you have to kind of challenge yourself. And another thing which is really interesting was that it took a lot of energy from me. So I couldn't do another jump that day because I was so exhausted. So yeah, this is how I started to do skydiving, and that was how my first jump was like.
Okay, so I have a question. So your very first skydive jump ever was solo?
Well, technically, the way it works, you jump with two instructors, so they kind of hold you, but they're not attached to you. So they're there in case you start spinning or they're if you don't reach to open the parachute. But once the parachute opens, you're basically alone. So you have to handle the landing by yourself. But it's a very supported process. So you're solo technically speaking, but there are people out there to support you. So if something happened, they're going to guide you through. So there are people who basically don't do anything in the first jump. There was a guy before me who basically froze the complete jump and he couldn't do anything. He just used static. And then the instructor opened the parachute for him and then they guide him through radio how to land. So it's a solo, but it's a very aided process. It's not like you're on your own.
Okay, and then what would the second jump be like? Same thing? You're just practicing more, same maneuvers,
So the
reviewing kind of thing.
The second jump was much more difficult for me than the first jump because on the first jump, I didn't know what to expect. So, like, yeah, I'm just gonna jump into the water. But then the second time you jump into the water, it's like, oh, I know how this feels. Like, I'm just gonna sink, right? So you're a lot more scared the second time. The second time was much more difficult for me from a psychological standpoint. So I failed level two and I had to do it again. And I failed again level two, which is something pretty demoralizing for me because people don't usually fail level two. They just fail level one or some further on. So I had to kind of push forward. There's something very interesting during my skydiving journey that my instructor told me that skydiving is about not giving up. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense. Skydiving is about being brave, bold, courageous, and fearless, right? Like, no, skydiving is about keeping going when you fail and you do it again and again and again. And then I realized that everything is about perseverance. It's you feel terrified and you fail and you go again. You feel terrified and you fail again and you do again and you do it again. And you just challenge yourself to the point of like, okay, I can do this. So yeah, this is how my second experience was like much more challenging than the first one.
Wow, but yeah, no, I've never thought about skydiving as, I mean, of course, I always thought it was terrifying, but I never thought of it as something that's teaching you the lessons to never give up. Because in my mind, if I checked it off my bucket list, I would do it once and then maybe never again, but I could say I did it.
Yeah, it depends. It took me a while to actually to start to enjoy it. There is a saying that the first time you jump when you smile in the free fall, it means that you actually start to enjoy it because the first couple of jump you're very tense and then people just don't smile at all. But I didn't smile at all through the course. Like my first time I smiled was I did my first complete solo jump. So yeah, it's absolutely right. But I feel through my experience and also to talk to people that this is something that it is for some people and not for some other people. Like I knew from the beginning that this is something for me. And there are other people who are very hesitant and it's not for them. I get that. So it's for some people and they know it. It's a calling. And when you see it, it's like, that's me. That's for me.
You also train indoors. Is that an option, like indoor skydiving
Yes.
courses?
So what happens is that one of the main thing about skydiving is your body position during the free fall because it's if you don't have a good body position, basically you're gonna start spinning and get tumbling, and that's very dangerous because if you're spinning when you open the parachute, you can have entangled lines and you can have malfunction. So there are a lot of things that can go wrong if you don't have a good position when you open the parachute. So all the training is about having the ability to stabilize yourself when you're unstable so you can open in a stable position, right? So going back to what I said earlier, the fact that I fell level two, the reason for which I fell level two is because I couldn't get stable in the air. So then the secondary option, the backup plan, is to send me to a wind tunnel so I can practice there for 20 minutes. So I can get myself stabilized, so I can just fly in a stabilized way. So indoor skydiving for us, it's an option when the jump doesn't go well and it feels like you need to fix a bunch of positions. So it's more like a tool that you utilize into your training process as opposed to replacement for it.
Okay, interesting. So, have you ever skydived? Have you ever been skydiving tandem after all this training initially?
No, no, I haven't. So, one of the things I probably never would never do it. The reason for that is because when you're tandem, you have something called a drop chute, which means that you have like a small parachute that keeps you stable, but that stability also takes away your ability to move in the air. So when I jump, I like to jump with other people so we can kind of play games in the air. So you can go backwards, forward, faster, faster, slower. So you can just move around. If you do a tandem, you're going to be fixed position. So you're not going to be able to do anything. So I would love to do that probably. If I could mix with other people because it's fun, but like I prefer now to jump with other people, each with our individual parachutes, so we can play around in the air as opposed to doing the tandem.
It's really cool. So, just full disclosure, Octavian, I have been skydiving, but only tandem and only once in Brisbane, Australia. And so, actually, no, it was Byron Bay, Australia. Shout out to Byron Bay.
How was
But
your experience?
I was scared, of course. I was terrified. A friend of mine who went with me was more terrified. So we had two options of whether to do a higher jump or a shorter jump. We did the shorter jump. So I think we only had 4 seconds or 5 seconds of airtime. But I was scared until I asked my tandem instructor, how did you learn skydiving? And she said, with my mom, who was my tandem instructor. And something about that put me at ease, and I really enjoyed it. I do remember smiling. So, but I haven't been back since, and I haven't ever considered solo jumping. So I
That
really admire your
that
bravery.
that's an interesting point because when you're sitting on your, on the beach or like somewhere which is very comfortable and you talk about skydiving, you're thinking like, I would never do that. But if you go to a drop zone and you see people jumping all day long and you talk to them and they talk about like, you talk about like, I went for a walk, just like I went for a jump. So it becomes something so trivial. So when you talk to people and you kind of trivialize and you take away all this kind of scary concept, becomes something which is very approachable. So I think that the first step towards overcoming your fear is not necessarily to kind of go for a jump. It's just go to the drop zone, spend some time there, and talk to people, and you'll see like this is people do that all the time, all day long.
And you never know who you're going to meet and what is going to put you at ease when you hear certain
Yeah,
stories like the one I heard. So Octavian, I'm
absolutely.
really curious. You told me before this interview that facing this physical fear through skydiving has actually helped you handle your emotional and your professional fears. Can you elaborate on how this helped you?
Okay, so I will tell you a story. So when I did my first when I went through skydiving school, I had a senior job into a SaaS company, a software company. So I was manager of the marketing department. So it was a fairly stressful job. And when I went through my skydiving experience, that was a full hands-on, all day long, intense experience. So another interesting thing is that we as human, we have two natural fears. We have fear of loud noises and free falling. And we don't get to experience free falling outside of skydiving ever without sustaining major injuries. So the normal experience that you have, you just fall from something and that's half a second and you spend 6 months in the hospital. That's an experience any human can have outside of skydiving. So that's a primal fear that you're facing when you're doing skydiving. It's a very primal embedded into your DNA, into your brain. Right. So I finished my FF. Go FF is the accelerated free fall, which is basically the school of skydiving. I finished the course. I went back to my job, and then what happens after you go back after a week of holiday? Everything is burning, like everybody needs you. And instead of feeling stressed, I felt exceptionally relaxed. Like my manager called me, it's like, "Hey, Octavian, we need to do those things, and this is urgent. This is fall apart." And I was like, "Just relax, take a deep breath. Everything is gonna be okay." So the idea is that fear is a sentiment that you have, and then facing it in any regards is going to help you facing it in any regards. So the idea is that learning how to manage yourself in a stressful situation you can apply the same principle in any situation you are, regardless of the factor of the stress. You just have to identify it's like, okay, this is something that could make me stressful, and then breathe and then calm yourself down and then get to it one step at a time. So two things I learned in my skydiving, which is one, breathe, like take a deep breath, make sure that you breathe. Second of all, think one thing at a time. Don't think too much in advance. Well, that's one my thing that I was doing the first time. I was in a plane, I was thinking about landing, and I was thinking about if I can do that right. So my instructor told me, listen, when you are in one activity, just think about the next thing. And then the next thing, when I was on the plane, I was thinking about the exit. That's all. And when I'm on the free fall, I'm thinking about the free fall. When I open the parachute, I'm thinking about landing. When I land, I'm thinking about the briefing and jump. So take one thing at a time. Don't think about too much in advance. Just okay, get to the next level, and then you'll figure out. You'll know what to do. So those are the rules that I apply in my personal life. When everything is stressful, I'm just thinking like, okay, what's the most important thing? What's the next thing I need to approach now? When I do that thing, and then I move to the next thing and the next thing, because at best you can only do one thing really good if you do it one at a time.
That is a really powerful lesson to learn. And I think you remember it even better when you're in extreme stress, as you learn it. Did you continue to go to more classes? Did you continue to put yourself in that situation with like more advanced classes later on?
Yeah, absolutely. It's if you turn out that you enjoy skydiving, it could be something that is pretty addictive, like you really want to do it more. And skydiving, it's a field which there is no cap for how good you can be in one field. And also there's so many directions you can go into. So you can learn on a continuous basis for the rest of your life if you want to. So yeah, I still keep that going, and I enjoy the challenge. I can tell something very interesting, which is at the beginning I wasn't not much that afraid of the fall of the experience as much as afraid of somebody grading me for something. So I had to execute some exercise in the air. So I identified the fact that that was the thing that was carrying me the most, and I continued to push it. So I did a following course. So you do the solo license, so you can jump by yourself. And I came back to Portugal a couple of weeks later, and I did my formation jumping course, which is about jumping with other people. So I want to challenge myself over and over again. So the idea is that, you know, I like to push myself in the directions and then, just progress as much as I can. And whenever I see that there is something that makes me uncomfortable, I press on that to solve it.
Fantastic. And what a powerful way to keep going in so many areas of your life and keep growing and challenging yourself. So now I want to go back to this idea of you learned about what a digital nomad was when you were in Portugal, learning how to skydive. So how did this training course help you shift into becoming a digital nomad, and how has it helped you since you became a digital nomad?
Okay, so the first thing I want to say is that skydiving is a very, very close and personal and connected community because there are not very many of us. So it's a very well connected, and I would say it's more like a brotherhood. So one thing throughout the training is that you're not looking only for yourself, but you're looking for the other people on the load as well. So if you see something wrong with somebody on the plane, you stop them. It's like, do not jump now because there's something wrong with your parachute. So that kind of connects us in so many different ways. So when I go into the course, you basically spend all day long at the drop zone. It's no, you go home and just do your stuff and then come back there for a couple hours. That's all. That's all your life for the time you're there. That means that you're gonna get to connect with people and then share stories and share experiences. And that's where I learned that there are a lot of people there who are on transit and then they were doing a jump, taking a laptop, doing a few emails, and then waiting for the next jump, and then just doing this as a recurrent thing. And I started to talk to them. It's like, hey, what are you doing? Like, you're working remotely. It's like, yeah, just I'm here for a couple of months, then I'm going to Egypt and I'm going to Syria and going to all these places. Like, oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that people do that. And then I get to connect more with them. And before skydiving, I was doing that more like as a part-time thing. So I had the base, I was just traveling for a couple of months, coming back to my base in London. And then I realized that this is something that you can do on a full time. You don't need a base and you can just, keep that going. So that was a very interesting concept for myself because I think that my lack of exposure to this lifestyle kind of limited myself to what's possible, and I didn't know that there is a possibility to actually travel full time. So when I was exposed to that, it's like, oh, I didn't know you can do that. I want to do that too. And then when I came back to London, I knew that my goal is to kind of figure out a way to travel and work full time without having the need to have a stable base. That's how, just meeting people who do that and have a very cool life that you aspire towards inspire me to try to do the same thing.
Never knew that skydiving school in the drop zone was also a co-working space. This is good to know for the future. More places to work from as a digital nomad.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Uh, and they are very common actually. Like almost everywhere you go in the world, there are job zones. And when I travel places, the first thing I look for is just to visit the local job zones. So just make connection in the area. And I know there are gonna be like-minded people there. And for me, the easiest way to make connection, I go to a local job zone in a new city, new country, and I make friends right away.
Oh, wow. Yeah, this might be unlocking some new ideas for people who already have this hobby or, yeah, never considered it. Because again, I always thought of it as like something I would do once, maybe twice, and then not visit the drop zone or a skydiving school again.
Yeah. And skydiving people, I don't want to boast here, but skydiving people are really, really cool in a sense. They're easy to talk to. They are open-minded people. And, because they have this kind of drive to challenge themselves, I can relate very easily with that. And I think that even people who are not skydivers can relate really easily with people who are from skydiving community because there is this drive to discover yourself, to challenge yourself, to become better, to improve.
Oh, great. So do you see some parallels between the skydiving community and the digital nomad community?
Absolutely. And I can see only from statistical standpoint in the sense that if you had to randomly pick up a person in London, a small big city, you have a very small chance of picking one who is skydiver. But if you pick somebody from the digital nomad community, you have a much higher one. So I met a few skydivers through the digital nomad community, just because they happen to be there. So there are a lot of skydivers in the digital nomad community because people are similar. They're interested in adventure, they're interested into traveling, they're interested into discovering the world and seeing from a different perspective. So I think that there are a lot of similarity between those communities.
Got it. So how do you balance like this need for adrenaline and always, wanting to be out there skydiving with like the need to also focus and find this discipline in your work, especially as a digital nomad? I know it can be hard for us to be disciplined sometimes when there's so much we want to do out there.
Yeah, that's a tough question. I don't think that there is like a rule that you can go by and it's going to work all the time. It's a day by day challenge, right? I think that I put myself some caps, some limitations, and it's like I'm going to do X amount of jobs per month. And then, I just work very hard knowing that I get to do those things, So for me, the fact that I get to do skydiving is something that motivates me as opposed to distracting me because, there's so much you can jump. Also, it's a pretty expensive sport. So, you have to be careful with the budget even though if you have a license, it can cost you like 40, 50 euros per jump, which is not a lot if you think about it. However, if you go to the drop zone, you don't go there to do one jump, you go there to do 7 to 10 per day. That's the goal. So that runs up to a huge amount of money. If you do that for a couple of days in a row, that's something, right? So the idea is that I keep myself motivated by working hard so I can get to go skydiving. So that's one thing that keeps me balanced.
So that's like the work-life balance that you found. It's like you feel
Exactly.
more motivated to work hard when you need to, so you can be rewarded by doing the thing you love.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's how it works for me.
Okay, so I'm curious, like you've already mentioned, there's a drop zone in every, well, not every town, but in many cities, of course, around the world, many places. Has skydiving then influenced how you choose your travel destinations as a digital nomad?
That's a good question. It's Yeah, absolutely is for sure. I think that every time when I'm okay, so if I'm traveling for a place for a couple of weeks, I wouldn't care too much if there's a drop zone around. But if I would like to stay as a base there for more couple of months, more than that, I'll definitely want to look for a place which is accessible to a drop zone. So yeah, that's basically a way that kind of I would say to some degree limits, but also like guides my basic desire to travel. So yes. to answer your question, it's absolutely a driving factor for the time when I want to spend more time in a specific location.
Gotcha. What are your favorite places that you've been skydiving?
Mm. I need to answer this question by clarifying it, right? So I think that the question is directing towards how beautiful is the view from up there. But from our standpoint, it's pretty different, which is how nice is the drop zone, how many times can you jump per day, and how good is the system, right? So you're thinking more technically speaking as opposed to the view you got from there. So from the view standpoint, the most beautiful one that I know of, it's very close to me. It's in Algarve. It's in Alvor. It's a local drop zone. That's one of the most beautiful in the world, if I might say, because it's really on the side of the ocean and you have a beach landing and it's fantastic. So if you want to do a tandem, absolutely, that was one to go to. However, from a system standpoint, it's actually pretty difficult to go there and there are a lot of limitations, so I prefer not to go there. So yes, from a beautiful standpoint, that's one of the best I've been to so far. But from a technical standpoint, as a skydiver, you think slightly different, like where I get better prices, more jumps and good weather and a good system. So those are different elements that we look for.
It's really interesting. I have not thought about it that way. Of course, I was thinking of most beautiful places. And if you haven't been to Byron Bay, it's the only view I've had, so I do recommend it to you. Have you been to Australia to do skydiving?
Mm, not yet. That's definitely something on my to-do list. So Australia and New Zealand are places that I've never been to, and everybody says that those are the most beautiful places and drop zones in the world. So I definitely want to go there.
All right. Well, I'm wondering, so you've already talked about how you learned, okay, if you handle the fear, then you can handle more difficult things in other parts of your life. I would say that's one lesson you've learned from skydiving. Do you have any unexpected lessons that you learned while skydiving that could apply to other
Oh,
parts of your
absolutely.
life?
Absolutely. I think the unexpected life lesson which I learned is to slow down. I was a very rushed person before, and as I mentioned at the beginning, I wanted to do everything in 4 days and just get on and be on my way. And then now it teaches me to kind of slow down and enjoy the journey. And I was thinking to myself very recently, last week, 2 weekends ago, I had opportunity to go to a drop zone and do a few jumps, and I was thinking of just one thing: just take your time and enjoy it. Don't rush. Don't kind of go to, I think that we live in a culture where everybody is rushing to get to the finish line. But what skydiving taught me is to just enjoy the ride, just, enjoy the process, don't rush and take every moment of the time and be grateful for it and enjoy it.
Yeah, always a great reminder. We get way too into our work and sometimes just things get so fast paced. Anything else you learned that you'd like to share with us?
Mhm. Anything else? I think that there is a path for something very interesting, and I'll try to formulate that in a nice manner. So I think that's what one thing I learned is that everybody has their own journey, everybody has their own path to avoid comparing myself to others. So going back to what I said earlier, I failed level two times, and that was an unprecedented thing because people don't do that. This is not a difficult level, and yet I failed it. So one thing that my instructor told me over and over again is that we are all on our own journey. You don't compare yourself to other because they have their own journey, their own challenges, their own different things. So another thing that I remember all the time is that when I look at other people doing things like, yeah, but they have their own journey, how my own, I have to go in on my own direction. So it's kind of taught me to focus more on my own journey, to stop comparing myself to others and kind of brought some humility into my life and also to stop comparing and stop envying people and just like this is my life and I'm on it and there is a reason for which I'm here and I just have to be on my own journey as opposed to thinking about this person is ahead or this person is doing this much better. Like no, this is about me. This is about my life, my journey, and I just have to walk my path.
Yeah, I feel like we could say the same as digital nomads as well, because you start getting on Instagram, you see all these places people are going, and it's not always possible. I think people think, oh, you're a digital nomad, you can go anywhere, but it's not always true. Of course, money time, how much you're working. And so, yeah, we're all doing our own version of digital nomad life, and we've shared a lot of those versions here on the podcast. So it's a great reminder. Yeah, don't compare.
Absolutely. And I think, yeah, I think that's with social media, it's a trap because you can look at other people like, oh. And I was thinking about, I was meditating about this the other day, which is what's the biggest lie that everybody believes?
Oh, there's so many lies that people seem to be believing these days. But yeah, that's I would say grass is always greener, or things, somebody
Exactly.
else is doing better than you.
I think the summary of that would be, I'll be happy when dot, dot, dot. And that's the biggest lie everybody, and it's a trap because there's always a bigger thing, a bigger mountain to climb. There's always more money to be made. There's always more things to have, right? So if you're in a state of thinking, I'll be happy when, and whatever you put yourself, you're never going to be happy. So that's something to remember, right? So that's going back to being on my own journey, remind me that my job is to be happy now, to be grateful now for what I have, and to kind of find my path and walk on it, as opposed to thinking, oh, when I have this car, I'm going to be happy. When I have this, I don't know, I'll be in this location, I'm going to be happy. So I think that this is also a trap for digital nomads, right? Because we have the ability to be anywhere in the world to some degree, right? To some limitation, but we do have a big ability to move places. And if you think to yourself, well, I'll be happy when I'll be in Bali. And then when you're in Bali, I'll be happy when I'm in Australia. And then it's like, I'll be happy when I'm in Portugal. It's a never ending loop that's going to always make you feel like the next destination is going to be the one that makes you happy and the next one. And then you're never going to be like, I'm happy now until you kind of make peace with yourself.
Yeah, no, I heard a great quote. Actually, I saw a great quote on social media, but I think it's really great for all of us as digital nomads. The grass isn't greener on the other side. The grass is greener where you water it. So focus on yourself, focus on where you are right now. Like you said, what am I focusing on right now? What is happening? And that's the most important thing and the best way you can deal with the day to day.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And remember that our happiness is a skill, not a mindset. No, it's
Yeah.
not a state. It's a skill, not a state.
Yes, yes, indeed. Well, Octavian, is there anything else that you would like to share with us before you go?
I would like to share a call to action for people to try to challenge themselves a bit more and to engage in adventures. I think that this is a fantastic way to discover yourself. When you put yourself in situations which are discomfortable, stressful, and outside of your, bubble, that's gonna get you a lot of information about yourself. You're gonna learn who you are. You're gonna learn, a lot of things about yourself. So I think that, if you want to figure out who you are as a person, you have to engage in activities that are outside the comfort zone. So I think that adventures are any kind of whatever is involved, right? Whatever you're afraid of, whatever the things that's like, I'll never do that. Okay, put that on your to-do list. Like, okay, book it and get it done. Because I feel like those are the things that you need to do to be able to know yourself. You need to break those barriers to kind of find who you truly are. So my call to action is get outside your comfort zone, try something new today, and you'll discover a lot of things that you didn't possibly consider before.
Thank you so much for that advice and that reminder. Maybe I should go skydiving again, Octavian. You're putting it back in
Absolutely.
my view here.
See, you should definitely do that. And if you're interested, I think you live fairly close to me, so we can do that together if you're up to it.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yes, that would be amazing. Tandem? I know you've never been tandem.
Well, yeah, so I can't really do that in a sense because you need a lot of jumps to be able to be instructor, but we can be in the same plane, which is going to be fun.
Oh, wow. Yeah, very cool. Okay, so Octavian, I really want to give people the chance to follow you. So where can they follow you on social media?
Okay, so they can follow us on Infinido. We have a YouTube channel and we have a Facebook page. It's Infinido Digital Nomad Coach. You can just Google it, you will find us there. And I also have a YouTube channel which is called Limitless Way, and basically where I made videos about skydiving, about scuba diving, about all my ventures that I do in various countries where I travel. So if you want to hear more and see more about what I do, you can find a lot of my adventures on my YouTube channel called The Limitless Way.
Oh, thank you so much, Octavian. And I hope you enjoy all of your future adventures and the ones we're going to have after listening to this podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me here.
Thank you.